What would you do if the person you trusted most, the one who held your hand at your parents' funeral and promised forever, turned around and said, "Thanks for the 5 million, darling. I needed it to build my startup. Now get out. My new girlfriend needs space." I stood there in the grand foyer of our Manhattan apartment, if you could even call 3,000 square feet of glass marble and Central Park views, just an apartment wheeling my hastily packed suitcases past the security guard Marcus had paid to escort me out, and him. He stood there like it was a movie scene, champagne in one hand, his other arm loosely draped around Amber, his so-called marketing director. That was the moment I realized. My love story was actually a con job, but this wasn't the beginning. To understand the betrayal, you have to go back to where it all started before the lies, the fraud, and the crash. 6 years ago, I was living the life I'd worked relentlessly for. A senior corporate attorney at Harrington & Blake, one of New York's top law firms. I specialized in contract law, which means I was the person companies called to bulletproof their deals. Long nights, intense cases, and a growing list of high-profile clients had me on track for partner. I earned every inch of that corner office. Marcus Reynolds entered my life on a spring night at a charity gala for underfunded public schools. I was there as a firm representative, dressed in navy silk and low expectations. He was seated at the table beside ours, tall, commanding, and impossible to ignore. Piercing eyes, an easy laugh, and confidence that somehow didn't cross the line into arrogance. Within 20 minutes, he'd charmed the entire table. Then he did something that should have told me everything I needed to know. He smoothly traded seats with the guy next to me, pretending it was accidental just to get closer. "Technology's gonna reshape security as we know it," he told me over dessert. My startup's developing encryption tools that could redefine how businesses protect their data. But it wasn't just the tech talk. It was the way he asked about my work, how he listened, how he remembered that my dream case as a kid had been the Enron prosecution, or that I'd paid my own way through Columbia law. In a room full of people flaunting their connections, he made me feel seen. 3 months later, we were inseparable. He sent orchids to my office with notes quoting obscure legal cases I'd once mentioned. He'd reserve tables at hidden restaurants only locals knew and plan weekend hikes where we'd talk about everything from ethics to 80s music. "I've never met someone like you," he whispered once while we watched the sun dip behind the Catskills. "You challenge me. And I like it." At the time, I thought it was love. I'd grown up comfortably in Connecticut. My father built a successful construction firm, and my mother handled real estate investments like a chessboard genius. But they raised me to be independent. I didn't flaunt our wealth, and I'd insisted on paying for law school myself. When I made senior associate, my dad said, "I'm proud of you. You never took the easy road." I had no idea that in just a few months, I'd be walking that road completely alone. The call came during a late meeting. My parents' plane had gone down on the return trip from Martha's Vineyard. Just like that, my world shattered. I was an only child. My safety net, my constants, gone. I collapsed into a grief so heavy it felt like suffocating underwater. But Marcus, he showed up. He held my hand through the funeral, cooked me breakfast I couldn't eat, paused his company's development cycle just to sit with me on the floor of my childhood bedroom while I cried into photo albums. "They raised an incredible daughter," he said one night, wiping my tears. I wish I'd known them longer. I promise I'll spend my life trying to be worthy of you." 8 months later, he proposed. Rooftop garden, string lights, a vintage sapphire ring that he said matched my eyes. "Life is unpredictable," he said. "Let's not waste another day not being each other's home." I said yes. Of course I said yes. The wedding was intimate, just close friends and a handful of colleagues held at our family lake house in the Berkshires. I remember him standing by the fireplace laughing with my father's old business partner. He looked at our home with wonder. "Your family really built something incredible," he whispered that night. "I hope I can give you even half of what they did." Looking back now, I see the clues I ignored. The way he asked detailed questions about estate law, how he lingered when my attorney discussed trust distributions. I thought it was curiosity. I didn't see the calculation. 13 months after the crash, the estate settled. The company was sold. The properties liquidated. After taxes and costs, I received just over $5 million. I told myself I'd use it wisely to build something meaningful and keep my parents' legacy alive. When I told Marcus, he didn't react like I expected. He wasn't surprised. He was ready. He came home that night with champagne and takeout from my favorite Thai place. To your parents, he toasted, and to new beginnings. Then we sat on the terrace watching the lights of the city blink beneath us. "The Series A is stalling," he said casually, swirling his glass. "Investors are spooked. Economic downturn. I might have to lay off half the dev team if something doesn't change." I felt that old fire rise, the desire to fix things. What would it take to keep it going? He looked at me like I'd handed him the moon. Honestly, $3 million would carry us through launch. But that's not your responsibility. I should have walked away. I should have said, "Then figure it out." But I didn't. Instead, I became his investor. $3 million. That's what I wired into Secure Frame's account, my inheritance, my parents' legacy, my future. I wasn't giving Marcus a gift. I was making an investment. We signed the paperwork together, 25% equity, a future board seat, and a clear agreement that I'd have visibility into the company's financials. Marcus even hired a corporate attorney to make it official. He made a show of it. Platinum bracelet on my wrist that night. The first of many celebrations he promised, fastening the clasp. "You'll see this company's going to change everything." It did, just not in the way I expected. Within weeks of the transfer, things changed. At first, it was subtle. Marcus working longer hours. Coming home after midnight. Networking dinners, he said. You know how VCs operate late nights and tech talk. Our weekend hikes vanished. Date nights disappeared. When I asked about the board seat, I was promised he waved me off. "We're not ready to formalize yet," he said. "Board meetings would just slow things down. But your input is always welcome." But it wasn't. Anytime I offered suggestions, marketing strategies, contract protections, team structure, he'd say, "Let's talk later," or "You're thinking too much like a lawyer, not like a founder." And then the expenses started showing up. A $12,000 charge at Tiffany's. Dinner receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of. A hotel suite at the Mandarin Oriental for 2 nights under his company's name. When I asked, Marcus barely looked up from his phone. "Client gifts," he said. "That Tiffany necklace for an investor's wife. The hotel. For our lead developer needed an off-site space to concentrate. You wouldn't understand. This is startup life, Rebecca." I tried to believe him. I tried so hard. I reminded myself I worked long nights, too. I knew how hard building something from scratch could be. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But the lies kept piling up. His phone always face down, his late-night calls behind closed doors, the way he brushed off every question with that same dismissive tone. "I thought you trusted me." And then came the Berlin trip. He was speaking at a tech conference, a huge deal for Secure Frame, a turning point. I expected to go with him. After all, I was a co-owner. Instead, he booked a solo flight. "Rebecca, it's all technical workshops. You'd be bored. And honestly, I'll be in meetings the whole time. You won't enjoy it." I stayed home. He texted once, "Conference going well. Miss you." That was it. The credit card statement said more. A $100 or $400 dinner at a romantic rooftop bistro. Spa treatments for 2. A $2 $800 charge at a boutique clothing store. All from Berlin. All during a conference I supposedly wasn't meant to attend. I confronted him when he returned. "That dinner, entertaining a German distributor and his wife," he said. "Spa treatment, a gift certificate for their hospitality. You need to stop micromanaging me, Rebecca. It's like you don't trust me to run my company, not our." That was the first time I realized I was no longer a partner. I was a problem. And still, I backed down. I told myself marriages go through phases. Startups are demanding. He's just under pressure. It'll get better after the launch. But it didn't. In fact, things got worse. He stopped coming home, missed dinners, ghosted date nights, stuck in code reviews he'd text, or late meeting with the CTO. Sometimes I'd fall asleep in an empty bed only to wake and find he'd slipped in sometime during the night. The emotional distance turned into a void. Even at work, my focus slipped. I handed off a major case to a junior associate because I couldn't think straight. Friends started asking if everything was okay. "You don't seem happy," my college roommate Stephanie told me over lunch. "When's the last time you and Marcus had a real conversation I didn't answer?" Because I couldn't remember. Then came the day he made a mistake. He left his tablet on the counter unlocked. I wasn't snooping, I wasn't even thinking, but a notification popped up: Amber Matthews, missing you already. Last night? I froze. I stared at that message like it had been burned into the screen. My stomach dropped. My hands trembled. Against every instinct in my body, I opened the thread. Dozens of messages, photos, plans. You're all I think about. Can't wait for this weekend. Dinner at the Nomad again. 4 months. It had been going on for 4 months. While I was investing in his dream, he was building a new life with someone else. When I confronted him that night, he didn't flinch. "She's our marketing director," he said coolly, pouring a scotch, like it was just another Tuesday. "We've become close. These things happen in startups." I stared at him. "These messages aren't about marketing." He shrugged. "Business and pleasure overlap sometimes. Amber gets the vision. She understands what it means to build something real, something that matters. You used to." His voice wasn't angry. It was detached, like he was already out the door, emotionally gone. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, but something inside me shifted. He thought I would fold. He thought the wife-turned-investor would quietly walk away. But what Marcus didn't know, he'd just crossed the wrong woman. That night, while Marcus snored beside me like nothing had happened, I lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling brain, spinning like a trial brief. He thought the betrayal was personal, emotional, that I'd wallow in heartbreak cry to my girlfriends and maybe take a yoga retreat to heal. He forgot I was a corporate attorney, a Columbia-educated, detail-obsessed, contract, ironclad problem. He forgot I read everything. The next morning I waited until he left early meeting, he muttered, and then opened the laptop. He thought I didn't know the password to. He'd used it once to email from the guest room. I saw the keystrokes in the reflection of the mirror. His ego made him careless. What I found wasn't just cheating, it was fraud. Amber Matthews, the so-called marketing director. Her resume was a patchwork of modeling gigs, social media consulting, and 2 months at a PR firm before she was mysteriously promoted to a 6-figure marketing role at SecureFrame. Her LinkedIn light on experience, heavy on filtered selfies. Her company email overflowing with dinner reservations, salon appointments, and spa bookings, all billed to SecureFrame as client engagement. I started digging into the company documents Marcus had always delayed showing me. Legally, as an equity holder, I had rights. He'd simply hoped I wouldn't push, but now I pushed. When I contacted the company secretary and requested access to financials, she stalled. I threatened legal action. That afternoon, the files arrived, watermarked PDFs, time-stamped internal memos, expense reports, stock issuance logs. That's when I saw it. My 25% ownership had been quietly diluted to just over 3%. How multiple rounds of new stock issued without my consent or notification. Amber, through a shell entity called AM Ventures, now held 15%. New investors had been sold shares based on valuations that didn't reflect the real numbers. It was like watching a slow-motion theft happen across spreadsheets. And it got worse. Company funds had been used to purchase a corporate retreat facility in Aspen, a property listed in Marcus's name. A Range Rover billed as Field Tech Transport. A luxury condo in Miami for Southern client visits. None of it disclosed. All of it illegal. This wasn't bad business. It was criminal. The next evening, I confronted Marcus in his home office. He didn't even pretend to be shocked. "I founded SecureFrame," he said coldly. "Every decision I made was to protect its growth. You were helpful. But this isn't your world. You diluted my equity without notice. I snapped. You used my investment to fund personal assets. You've lied to your investors. And I have it all documented. His expression didn't change. You really think the board will side with you, he sneered. You're the jilted wife. I'm the visionary founder. You want your money back? Good luck. It's deployed. Go cry to your lawyer friends. He stepped closer. You weren't built for this world, Rebecca. You read contracts. I write the vision. Amber believes in that. She understands the pressure, the hustle. That moment, those words broke something in me. Not sadness, not heartbreak, precision. I wasn't going to fight back emotionally. I was going to build a case, a real one, with exhibits, witnesses, and subpoenas. The next day, I called Jessica Harper, my law school roommate. She was now a senior investigator with the Manhattan DA's office. We met at a cafe on 22nd where nobody knew me. I laid everything out: the fake shell companies, the diluted shares, the diverted investor funds. Her brow furrowed deeper with every document. Rebecca, she said quietly, this isn't just a bad breakup. This is securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. You realize he could go to prison. Can I get my money back? I asked. Jessica shook her head slowly. It won't be easy, but if you want justice, you'll need to fight him in every direction at once. I didn't blink. I want everything I said. The money, the truth, the company, and I want him to never see it coming. That afternoon, I hired Michael Donovan, a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud and corporate embezzlement. Quiet, methodical, and brilliant. Men like Marcus always leave trails, he said. They think charm is armor, but money always leaves footprints. Over the next 3 weeks, we built a portfolio of damning evidence. Photos of Marcus and Amber together in Berlin, Aspen, and LA. Financial transfers through shell companies in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. Internal board minutes. Marcus never disclosed to me detailing decisions that directly diluted my shares. It was all premeditated. He'd been planning this before I signed the investment agreement. The most chilling detail, an internal memo labeling me legacy investor, low engagement. He'd framed me as uninvolved to justify cutting me out. This wasn't business. This was war. It was a Thursday. Overcast, windy, the kind of day that already feels like a warning. I came home from work, exhausted, wired, and ready to finalize my plan with Jessica and Michael, and found a thick manila envelope on the marble kitchen island. A single sheet rested on top, proposed divorce settlement. No note, no conversation, no courage. Just a neatly stapled packet with an offer so insulting it made me laugh. $100,000. That's what Marcus thought my $3 million investment, my equity, my sleepless nights, my years meant $100,000, and a handwritten note in the margin. Let's keep this clean, Rebecca. That night, when he finally came home, tie-loosened, face smug, he acted like the entire thing was mutual, as if we'd had a mature, rational discussion and agreed to go our separate ways. This is for the best, he said, pouring himself a drink. We've grown apart. I'm offering a fair settlement. No drama. Is that what your lawyer told you to say I asked? He didn't even blink. Rebecca, don't turn this into a war you can't win. I've got the best corporate attorneys in New York, and you're what? Bringing some divorce lawyer to a tech fight I didn't answer. I just smiled, nodded, and went to bed. What Marcus didn't know was that earlier that day I had already filed a separate civil suit for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and shareholder deception. I had already scheduled meetings with the SEC and the Manhattan DA's office. Jessica was preparing the documentation. Eleanor Walsh, my new attorney, a pit bull in designer heels, had already sent preservation letters to Marcus's legal team freezing discovery. He thought this was the end. It was just my opening statement. I stayed quiet. That was my strategy. Let him think I was defeated. Let him write his own downfall. And he did perfectly. The next Monday, I returned from work to find the locks changed. Not just changed, guarded. Marcus stood in the lobby with 2 security men and my belongings in 3 mismatched suitcases, like I was a squatter, like I was a problem to be escorted out. Company counsel advised I secure assets during the separation. He said loud enough for the doorman and a few nosy neighbors to hear. "You'll be staying elsewhere." I stared at him, trying to decide whether I felt more rage or disbelief. "You can't just throw me out. This is my home. The apartment's in my name," he replied with a smirk. "A precaution I took knowing your family wealth might make you complicated." He gestured to the bags. "Your items are packed. Anything missing can be coordinated through legal." One of the guards stepped forward when I reached for the elevator. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said. "We have instructions not to let you upstairs." And then the doors opened. Amber walked in. Head-high cheekbones sharper in person than they were in those filtered selfies. She pretended to be surprised. "Oh, I didn't realize you'd still be. I can come back," she offered. Marcus grinned. "No need. Rebecca was just leaving." He raised his champagne glass because of course he had one and said, "Thanks for the $5 million, darling. I needed it to build my startup. Now get out. My new girlfriend needs space." The humiliation burned like acid in my throat. I could feel the neighbors pretending not to watch. The silence was so loud, but I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled. I took the bags. I walked down that marble driveway without a single backward glance. The car Marcus had ordered probably for optics took me to a modest downtown hotel, the kind with vending machines instead of minibars. I sat on the bed surrounded by chaos and broken memories. My suits were wrinkled, my heels scuffed. A bottle of dry shampoo clattered out of the suitcase when I opened it. And then the flood came. Grief, rage, self-loathing. How had I let this happen? How had I missed so many red flags? Was I really that desperate for connection after losing my parents that I'd ignored every gut instinct I had? I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Queens, radiator heat peeling paint a landlord who only communicated via text. It was a universe away from the Central Park skyline, but it was mine. I told work I needed a week family emergency. I couldn't function. I barely ate. I watched documentaries on repeat just to have background noise. I checked SecureFrame's site like a stalker. Then the TechCrunch article hit. SecureFrame secures $30 million in Series B. Valuation tops $120 million. And there it was. A glossy photo of Marcus and Amber toasting champagne at some rooftop party. His hand on her waist, her head tilted just right. A quote from a VC calling Marcus one of the most exciting minds in data security. No mention of me. No trace of the $3 million that saved the company. No acknowledgement of the contracts I'd reviewed, the connections I'd used, the nights I stayed up writing his pitch deck when he was too tired to finish. I'd been erased. Then came the text, an unknown number, a screenshot of Marcus and Amber dining at my favorite restaurant, our anniversary place. Caption, "He's upgraded. Accept it and move on." I stared at the phone. My hands stopped shaking. Something inside me settled. Not pain, not despair. Steel. I texted Jessica. "I'm ready to go all the way." Her reply came instantly. "Good. Meeting tomorrow." 8 a.m. Bring everything. He thought he'd won. That's what makes men like Marcus so dangerous. They mistake your silence for surrender. They believe quiet means weak. But in reality, it's the silence before a storm. And I was about to become the Category 5 hurricane that leveled his world. At 8 a.m. sharp, I walked into Jessica's office wearing the same black suit I wore the day I got my first legal internship. Not because I needed the luck, because I needed the reminder. I was still that woman, sharp, hungry, unshakable. She was already waiting alongside Eleanor Walsh, my civil attorney. Together, we laid out every piece of evidence, the wire transfers, the fake board minutes, Amber's non-existent qualifications, the diluted shares, the embezzled funds. Eleanor flipped through the binder and looked up. "You have options, but we move now before Marcus gets the next round of funding and buries everything deeper." That afternoon, Michael Donovan, my private investigator, came in with updates. Big ones. He's planning a major launch event, Michael said, tossing a stack of glossy invites on the table. Edison Ballroom 3 weeks out. Hundreds of industry guests. He's calling it Secure Frame's Coming Out Party, New Product Press Investor Courting. It's all or nothing. Perfect Eleanor smiled. Then we'll burn it down the day before. Phase 1. The SEC, through Eleanor's former connections as a securities attorney, we secured a fast-track meeting with senior investigator Robert Callahan. We didn't go in crying betrayed wife. We went in with documentation timelines and legal frameworks. This isn't just internal mismanagement, Jessica said, sliding the evidence forward. This is securities fraud, multiple unregistered stock issuances, investor deception, personal enrichment through undisclosed shell companies. Callahan studied the files. We'll open a formal investigation. Quietly for now. Phase 2. The investors. You want to make a narcissist panic, shake the people who fund him. Through back channels, Eleanor arranged one-on-one meetings with 3 of Secure Frame's largest Series B investors. First up, James Harrington, a silver-haired VC with a Hudson View office and the coldest poker face in New York. I walked in with my binder, my story and my calm. Mr. Harrington. I'm not here for sympathy, I began. I'm here to let you know that your $10 million is currently propping up a fraud. He didn't blink. Our due diligence process is thorough, Ms. Thompson. Was it thorough enough to find this? I asked, placing proof of Marcus's offshore transfers and Amber's holding company, AM Ventures, on the table. Did your due diligence show you that the company was within weeks of collapse before my $3 million investment saved it? Harrington's jaw tightened. This wasn't disclosed, nor was your equity. It gets worse, Eleanor added calmly, laying down the SEC contact info. You'll want to be on the right side of this when the subpoenas go out. By the end of the meeting, Harrington looked pale. What exactly are you asking, Truth? I said. And for your firm to hold back future investments until this is cleaned up, or you'll be funding his legal defense, not a product launch. He nodded. That was one. The next 2 investor meetings went similarly calm. Presentations, evidence delivered, reputations trembled. Phase 3. The press. I wasn't going to post rants or viral videos. I went to Taylor Ross, an investigative journalist at Tech Journal, known for bringing down more than one overhyped startup. We met in a Brooklyn cafe far from the Silicon Alley scene. This is Theranos meets Tinder, he muttered, flipping through the evidence. Fake executive, romantic entanglement, millions misused, but the personal angle. You being the erased founder, that's the hook. I don't want to be the jilted wife, I said. This isn't about heartbreak. This is about investors being conned, employees being misled, and a man who thought charm exempted him from ethics. Ross smiled. That's exactly what will make this story explode. Time it right, Eleanor warned him. Right before the launch. He nodded. Done. In the background, Michael continued tracing the shell companies and Amber's involvement. Turned out, AM Ventures wasn't just a vanity holding company. It was part of a laundering triangle that allowed Marcus to buy property without ever touching company records. Everything was structured to make recovery difficult and lawsuits exhausting. But we had what we needed, and the timing was perfect. 3 days before the product launch, the first SEC notices went out. Marcus received a request for financial disclosure. Probably thought it was routine. 2 days before James Harrington's VC firm issued a press release, we are placing a hold on further Secure Frame investment pending an internal review. That same day, another firm followed suit. And then came the match that lit the fire. Taylor Ross's headline on Tech Journal hit the front page, Secure Frame's Shattered Foundation Allegations of Fraud, Deception, and Betrayal from Inside the Boardroom. It named Marcus Reynolds, described my erased investment, detailed the dilution tactics, included redacted investor statements, and most importantly, revealed that the SEC was investigating. The photo they chose, Marcus and Amber raising champagne glasses. The caption, "Thanks for the $5 million, darling." Twitter exploded. Reddit caught fire. Tech bloggers dissected every paragraph. Within 12 hours, Secure Frame's launch event was postponed indefinitely. Amber's social media vanished. The company's credit cards were deactivated. Marcus went silent. But the best moment. The next morning, I walked into Secure Frame headquarters, not as his wife, not as his investor, but with two SEC investigators, Eleanor and Michael. The receptionist blinked as we showed our court order. "Miss Thompson," she whispered, "Mr. Reynolds isn't accepting visitors." "This isn't a visit," I replied. And just like that, I stepped into the boardroom Marcus had locked me out of for nearly a year. The boardroom looked different now. Gone were the catered lunches, the sleek orchid arrangements Amber used to post on Instagram like she had anything to do with this company. Gone were the glossy pitches and buzzword-laden nonsense Marcus used to spew to manipulate investors. The long glass table was bare. The lights overhead felt too bright, too honest. I stood at the head of that table not just as the woman Marcus had betrayed, not just as the erased founder, but as the only person in that room who still gave a damn about rebuilding something real. And they knew it. Every remaining board member had shown up that morning not out of loyalty, but fear. Marcus was on leave pending multiple investigations. Amber had gone dark. The brand was in shambles. Clients were backing out. Even junior engineers were jumping ship. "Let's cut to it," said Jeffrey Alcott, one of the original VCs. "You have legal standing evidence and a better moral compass than Marcus ever pretended to. The board is prepared to vote if you're willing." Willing, I had bled for this company. Quietly, behind the scenes. When no one was watching, I was the one doing the late-night financial modeling, correcting code typos, wiring in my own inheritance just to cover payroll. I looked around the table, then down at my hands, calm, open. "I don't want permanent control," I said, "but I will serve as interim CEO on 3 conditions." They leaned forward, eyes wide. 1, I clean house. Amber Marcus, anyone complicit, they're out. "Done," Alcott said immediately. 2, we conduct a full financial audit, make public disclosures, and return any investor funds that were taken under fraudulent pretenses. There was a pause, then slow nods. 3, when I step down, I choose my successor. Who asked another member? I turned to the door. Angela Rivera stepped in, my former client from my legal days. MIT grad, cybersecurity prodigy. The woman Marcus once laughed off as too analytical for this space. She wasn't flashy. She didn't chase clout. But she built things that lasted. "Angela," I said, "will rebuild this company not on lies, but on engineering, ethics, and equity. And I'll mentor her every step of the way." The board voted, unanimously. It didn't feel like triumph. Not yet, but it felt true. Over the next 4 months, we turned the chaos into order. Amber tried to sue. We countersued. She backed down when the DA made it clear she was next on the list for wire fraud conspiracy. Marcus. He finally resurfaced in court, sunken-eyed, disheveled, still in denial. He tried to negotiate a reduced penalty in exchange for insights into the platform he helped build. "Sir, the judge said, you are not a visionary. You are a thief. Sit down." The final ruling disqualified him from ever serving as an officer in a publicly traded company again. As promised, I stepped down quietly once Secure Frame was stable. Angela took over as CEO. Within a year, she launched the very feature Marcus once claimed was impossible real-time threat detection with adaptive privacy tools. The company's valuation not only recovered but doubled, this time on actual merit. My equity still intact. I didn't liquidate. But I did use some of the settlement money to do something no one expected. I launched the Gold Foundation, a nonprofit focused on helping women recover from financial manipulation, whether through relationships, family, or business, free legal consults, microgrants, workshops on hidden abuse and shared accounts, joint investments, and the red flags of financial gaslighting. We've helped over 200 women so far. As for me, I live in Hudson now. Peaceful, unassuming. There's a little garden. I run morning yoga at the local community center. No one asks about Secure Frame. They just know me as Rebecca, who brings really good cinnamon rolls on Saturdays. But every so often, I get an email. One that says I thought I was crazy until I read your story. Or thank you. You saved my future. And then there's Daniel. He came back into my life gently. He never tried to rescue me. Just offered honesty, dignity, encouragement. Turns out he left corporate law to become a federal prosecutor focused on white-collar crimes. The irony, he joked on our first real date, is that I'm chasing the same kind of men who used to sit beside me in meetings. We're not married. Not yet. Maybe never. We talk about the idea sometimes, but we're not building a life out of fear or performance. We're building something honest. Sometimes the people who betray you the most are the ones you gave everything to. Your money, your trust, your name. But here's what they'll never understand. You can strip away my title, my seat, even my home. But not my value, and certainly not my voice. Marcus thought he buried me. But I wasn't a corpse. I was a seed. And this time I grew with fire in my roots and gold in my spine.